Widow of Klenworth Hall. Chapter 1. The Shadow in the Portrait Gallery. The rain fell upon Klenworth Hall with a persistence that felt personal, each drop a tiny hammer driving nails into the lid of Alison's new life. She stood at the vast window in the long gallery, her reflection a pale ghost superimposed upon the sodden, endless grounds. The elms that lined the drive were skeletal black against the bruised sky, their branches clawing at the clouds as if begging for mercy. Alison felt a kinship with them. Barely 6 weeks ago, she had arrived at this house as a bride. Now, she stood in it as a widow. Lord Ashford Klenworth, her husband of a mere 23 days, was dead. A fall from his horse, they'd said. A tragic accident on the slick autumn roads. He had been found by a gamekeeper in a ditch, his neck broken. The image haunted her. Ashford, who had been so full of quiet life, of gentle smiles and book-filled rooms, lying still and broken in the cold mud. The Earl of Klenworth had not been a young man. At 48, he was twice her age, a confirmed bachelor and scholar whom society had assumed would never marry. Alison, the impoverished daughter of a country vicar, had been as shocked as anyone when he'd chosen her. She hadn't loved him, not with the breathless passion of the novels she'd once devoured. But she had felt a profound and tender respect for him. He was kind, intelligent, and treated her not as a trophy, but as a companion. In the quiet library of Klenworth, she had found a sanctuary. In Ashford, she had found a friend. And now, even that small, hard-won happiness was stolen. A discreet cough broke her reverie. She turned to find Mrs. Penvan, the housekeeper, a woman whose face was a permanent mask of dour efficiency. "The master's solicitor has arrived, my lady. I've put him in the morning room." Alison nodded, her throat tight. "My lady." The title felt like a brand, a mark of ownership over a property she had never truly possessed. She smoothed the folds of her black crepe dress and made her way through the cavernous, silent halls. Klenworth was a mausoleum of dark wood, ancestral portraits, and the lingering scent of beeswax and wood smoke. In the morning room, a small ferret-like man named Mr. Jabez Finch was unpacking a leather satchel. He rose as she entered, offering a bow that was more of a twitch. "My lady," he said, his voice thin and reedy, "please, accept my most profound condolences. A terrible, terrible tragedy." "Thank you, Mr. Finch," Alison said, seating herself. "You have news of the estate?" "Indeed. The late Earl's will is a straightforward document, as you might expect." He unfolded a parchment, his eyes scanning the dense text. "To his widow, Lady Alison Klenworth, he leaves a life interest in the dower house and an annual stipend of £500. The remainder of the estate, including Klenworth Hall and all its lands and chattels, passes to his cousin and nearest male heir, Mr. Percival Klenworth." Alison's breath caught. She had known this, intellectually, but hearing it spoken aloud made it devastatingly real. Klenworth was not, and had never been, her home. It was merely a waiting room. She was a guest who had overstayed her welcome by a few weeks. "And Mr. Percival?" she asked. She had met the man only once at the wedding. He was a florid, thick-necked man in his 40s, with small, suspicious eyes that had roamed over her and the hall's silver with equal, covetous interest. Ashford had seemed tense in his presence. "He is, of course, en route from London," Finch said, a hint of distaste in his voice. "He should arrive within the day to take possession." To take possession, like a conqueror claiming a vanquished foe's spoils. Alison felt a wave of nausea. She would have to pack her few belongings, her books, and retreat to the small, draughty dower house, to live out her days on the fringes of the life she might have had. That night, the wind howled around the hall like a tormented spirit. Unable to sleep, Alison sat by the dying embers of the fire in her room, a volume of poetry open and unread on her lap. A soft knock at the door made her start. It was a young maid, her face pale in the candlelight. "My lady, I'm sorry to disturb you, but this came for you. It was on the silver salver in the front hall, with the afternoon post." Alison took the folded letter from the maid's trembling hand. It was a simple, cream-coloured envelope, addressed in a flowing, familiar hand. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She knew that handwriting. She had seen it on notes left on her pillow, on the fly-leaves of books he'd given her. It was Ashford's. With fingers that shook, she broke the plain wax seal. The single sheet inside was dated 3 days prior. "My dearest Alison, if you are reading this, then my fears have been realised, and I am no longer with you. Do not despair, my love. You must be strong. Trust no one at Klenworth, not my cousin, not the servants. No one. There is a danger here I have been too foolish and too proud to name. Look to my private study. There is a loose panel behind the portrait of my father. Within it you will find a journal. It holds the truth. They will try to take everything from you. Do not let them. Asterisk. Yours, in life and beyond, Ashford." Alison read it twice, 3 times. The world tilted on its axis. This letter was not a trick of grief. It was real. The paper was new. The ink was fresh. If he had written it 3 days ago, he was alive when he wrote it, and if he had feared for his life, the accident, the slick roads, the fall, trust no one. A cold dread, sharper than the grief, pierced her. Was it an accident? Or was it murder? Chapter 2. The Magistrate's Doubt. The arrival of Percival Klenworth the next morning was everything Alison had dreaded. He swept into the great hall as if he already owned it, shaking the rain from his greatcoat onto the flagstones and bellowing for mulled wine. His eyes, when they found Alison standing on the staircase, were not those of a grieving relative. They were the eyes of a landlord surveying a sitting tenant. "Ah, the little widow," he said, his voice a gravelly boom. "My condolences, of course, terrible business. But life, as they say, must go on. My man will be around this afternoon to start the inventory." Alison descended the stairs slowly, her back straight. "Mr. Klenworth, I am grateful for your sympathy. However, there are matters of my husband's personal effects that I must attend to before any inventory is taken." Percival's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Personal effects? My dear lady, everything in this house is now my personal effect, but by all means, take your time, within reason." He took a loud slurp of his wine. "The Dower House is being aired as we speak. Charming little place. A bit damp in winter, I'm told, but I'm sure you'll make it cosy." The casual cruelty of it was a slap. Alison gripped the banister, Ashford's letter a burning weight in the pocket of her dress. "I shall need access to Lord Klenworth's private study." Percival's smile vanished. "The study is to be sealed until the probate is complete. Standard procedure." "I am not interested in the family silver or the land deeds," Alison said, her voice low but firm. "I want his books, his personal papers, things of sentimental value." He studied her for a long moment, and she saw a flicker of something, suspicion perhaps, or calculation, in his piggy eyes. "Sentiment," he repeated, as if it were a foreign word. "Very well. You may have 1 hour. My man will accompany you." An hour. It was enough. It had to be. His man was a hulking brute named Smeeth, who followed her to the study and stood by the door like a granite statue, his eyes never leaving her. The study was just as Ashford had left it. The smell of his pipe tobacco still lingered in the air. His reading glasses lay on the desk. With her back to Smeeth, Alison moved to the portrait of the old Earl, a stern-faced man who stared down at her with disapproval. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Look to my private study. There is a loose panel behind the portrait." She ran her fingers along the wall, feigning interest in the bookshelves. She felt the edge of the panel, her nail catching on a nearly invisible seam. With a gentle push, it sprang open, revealing a shallow recess. Inside lay a small, leather-bound journal. She slid it into the deep pocket of her skirt, her movements masked by the rustle of fabric. She then turned, selected a random book from the shelf, and faced Smeeth. "This is all I wished for, a volume of poetry he gifted me." Smeeth grunted, unimpressed. He had no idea what he had just failed to see. Back in her room, Alison devoured the journal. It was written in Ashford's precise hand, a chronicle of suspicion and fear. It detailed his cousin Percival's mounting debts, his desperate pleas for loans that Ashford had refused. It spoke of Percival's threats, veiled in the language of family grievance. But the most chilling entry was the last, dated the day before his death. "Percival was here again today. He was beyond rage. He said he would have Klenworth, one way or another. I saw something in his eyes I had never seen before, a desperate, murderous intent. I am afraid, Alison. For myself. For you. If anything should happen to me, you must not let him win. I have taken steps. A letter has been sent to a man I trust implicitly, a magistrate in Truro named Mr. Silas Thorne. He is honest and incorruptible. Tell him everything. Hope, a tiny, fragile flame, flickered to life within her. She was not alone. Ashford had provided for her even in this. The next morning, while Percival was occupied with his inventory, she sent a maid with a sealed letter to the posting inn, addressed to Mr. Silas Thorne. He arrived 3 days later. Alison met him in the walled kitchen garden, away from the prying eyes and ears of the hall. Mr. Thorne was not what she expected. Instead of a bewigged and pompous official, she found a man in his late 30s, with a lean, intelligent face, sharp grey eyes that missed nothing, and the capable hands of a man more at home on a horse than behind a desk. He listened without interruption as she told him everything: the sudden death, the letter, the hidden journal, Percival's behaviour. When she finished, he took the journal and the letter, examining them with a magnifying glass from his pocket. He studied the postmarks, the handwriting, the quality of the paper. Finally, he looked up, his expression grave. "The handwriting is a match to samples of Lord Klenworth's correspondence I have seen," he said. "The letter, if written on the date it bears, was posted before his death. It is remarkable." "You believe me?" Alison asked, her voice trembling with relief. Mr. Thorne looked at her, and for a moment his professional reserve softened. "I believe you have cause for suspicion, Lady Klenworth. A man who fears for his life, who writes such a letter, does not then conveniently fall from his horse by accident. The timing is too perfect for Percival Klenworth, but suspicion is not proof. We need evidence." He asked her 100 questions. About the day of the accident, about the horse, about Percival's movements, about the servants. He was meticulous, methodical. He asked to see the stable, the tack room, the spot where Ashford's body was found. "A fall from a horse is a common enough tragedy," Thorne said, as they walked towards the stables. "But a broken neck is a violent, decisive injury. It can be the result of a fall. It can also be the result of a powerful blow, disguised as a fall." In the stable, Ashford's horse, a gentle, reliable gelding named Orion, stood in his stall. Thorne examined the animal, checking his legs, his hooves, his temperament. He was a calm, unflappable beast, the last creature one would expect to throw its master. "They said the roads were slick with rain," Thorne murmured, stroking Orion's nose. "A spook, a stumble, a fall. It could happen." He turned to the head groom, an old man with watery eyes. "Was there anything amiss with the saddle that day? The girth? The bridle?" The groom shook his head. "No, sir. I checked it all myself before his lordship rode out. Everything was in perfect order." Thorne nodded, filing the information away. Later, they walked the path to the ditch where Ashford was found. The ground was churned and muddy, but Thorn knelt, parting the wet grass with his fingers, searching for... Alison didn't know what. A piece of torn fabric, a displaced stone, anything. He found nothing. The scene had been trampled by the men who found the body and those who came to retrieve it. Back at the hall, they were met by a fuming Percival. "What is the meaning of this, Thorn?" he blustered. "My cousin is dead, an unfortunate accident, and you come here on the word of a hysterical woman to turn my household upside down." "I am here, Mr. Klenworth, to investigate a suspicious death, as is my sworn duty," Thorn replied calmly. "The widow's concerns are valid and warrant inquiry. I trust you have no objection to justice being served." Percival's face purpled. "Justice? The justice is that I am now the Earl of Klenworth. That is the only justice that matters. I want you off my land." "This land and this inquiry are now under the jurisdiction of the Crown, my lord," Thorn said, his voice hardening. "I will leave when my investigation is complete." That evening, Thorn and Alison met again in the library, a fire crackling between them and the encroaching dark. "He is afraid," Alison said. "His bluster is a mask for fear." "Indeed," Thorn agreed, "a guilty man's fear. But we still lack the one piece of evidence that would hang him. The coroner's inquest ruled it an accident. We need to prove intent. We need to prove murder." He sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. "I confess, Lady Klenworth, I am at an impasse. The physical evidence has been washed away by rain and time." Alison stared into the flames, the hope she had felt beginning to gut her. Then, a thought struck her. "Mr. Thorn, the letter Ashford sent to me. He wrote it 3 days before he died. But what if he wrote more than one? What if he was sending letters to others, setting his affairs in order, leaving a trail?" Thorn sat forward, his eyes sharpening. "It's possible. To whom would he write? A solicitor, perhaps? A friend?" "He had no close friends," Alison said sadly. "His life was here, in his books. But he mentioned you. He said he'd taken steps. He sent a letter to you, warning you. But you only came because I sent for you. You never received that letter?" Thorn's face went very still. "No. I received no letter from Lord Klenworth." They stared at each other, the implication hanging in the air between them, heavy and sinister. The letter to Thorn had been sent. It had never arrived. Someone had intercepted it. Someone in the house, someone who had been watching, waiting. "It was him," Alison whispered. "Percival. He was here. He could have bribed a servant to watch the post." "It is more than likely," Thorn said, a new energy in his voice. "He intercepted the warning. He knew his cousin suspected him. That would have pushed him to act sooner. It is another thread, Lady Klenworth, and we must pull it." Chapter 3. The Living Hand. The hunt for the missing letter consumed them. Thorn, with a quiet authority that belied his mild manner, began discreetly questioning the household staff. He was a master of the unthreatening query, the sympathetic ear. He learned of small, strange occurrences in the days before Ashford's death. A light in the study late at night when his lordship was known to be abed. A stable boy who thought he saw a figure lurking near the tackroom. A kitchen maid who mentioned that Smeeth, Percival's man, had been unusually interested in the comings and goings of the postboy. Each small detail was a stitch in a growing tapestry of conspiracy. But still, there was no definitive proof. Percival, emboldened by the lack of evidence against him, grew more insufferable. He openly mocked Thorn's investigation and treated Alison with a contemptuous pity that was more threatening than outright hostility. He began making changes to the house, moving furniture, ordering the removal of portraits he deemed unflattering. He was erasing Ashford, claiming the space as his own. Alison felt his presence like a suffocating fog. She spent as much time as possible with Thorne, who had taken a room at the local inn. Their conversations, once purely professional, began to take on a different quality. She found herself looking forward to his visits, to the sound of his voice, to the quiet strength in his grey eyes. He was not just her champion, he was becoming her friend. And in the lonely, terrifying world she now inhabited, that friendship was a lifeline. One blustery afternoon, as Thorne was taking his leave, a messenger on a lathered horse rode up to the inn. He handed Thorne a thick envelope. Thorne's expression as he read the contents shifted from curiosity to sharp attention. He turned to Alison, who was waiting by her carriage. "Lady Klenworth," he said, his voice taut with excitement. "This is a reply from a query I made to the Royal Mail Office in London. They have a system for tracking undelivered mail. A letter posted from Klenworth village to Truro on the date Ashford wrote in his journal was logged at the local post office. It never reached its destination, but it was received at the Truro distribution centre and signed for, not by me, by a man using my name." Alison's heart thudded. Who? That, they could not say, but they gave a description. A large man with a ruddy complexion and small, suspicious eyes. "Smeeth," Alison breathed. It was Smeeth. Percival sent him to intercept it. "So it would seem. We have the signature of a man committing mail fraud. It is a crime, but it is still not proof of murder. It is proof of a cover-up, which implies a crime to cover. We need the crime itself." He looked at her, his gaze intense. "Ashford's letter to you mentioned a journal. He told you where to find it. But what if he also told you in that letter how he was to be killed? He suspected Percival. He might have anticipated the method." Alison thought back, her mind racing. He said there was a danger he was too foolish to name. He didn't say how." "Then we must think like a killer," Thorne said. "How do you make a man fall from his horse? You could spook the horse, but Orion is a steady creature. A slick road is an act of God, not a man. But a man can make the road slick, or he can make the saddle slick." A memory sparked in Alison's mind. "The stable boy, the one you spoke to. He said he saw someone near the tack room. What if they weren't after the saddle but the girth, or the bridle?" Thorne's eyes widened. The girth. A girth that has been weakened or partially cut would hold under the weight of a man mounting, but under the stress of a ride, the bouncing, the shift of weight, it would snap. The rider would be thrown. If the road was hard, a broken neck would be a likely outcome. It was a horrifyingly simple, undetectable plan. No poison, no weapon, just a piece of leather, carefully sabotaged. They raced back to the hall, to the tack room. The saddle Ashford had used was still there, hanging on its rack, untouched since the day of the accident. Thorne examined the girth, a thick strap of stiff leather. To the naked eye, it was intact. But when he took it down and flexed it, running his thumb along the underside, he found it. A thin, almost invisible cut, hidden in the natural grain of the leather. It ran almost 2/3 of the way through the strap. It was a wound made by a sharp knife, expertly placed. It was the signature of a murderer. Thorne held it up, his face grim. "Here is your proof, Lady Klenworth. This was no accident. This was murder." Alison felt a wave of dizziness. She had suspected it, known it in her heart, but to see the physical evidence of the violence that had taken Ashford from her was devastating. Tears she had held back for weeks finally spilled over. Thorne was at her side in an instant, his hand gently supporting her elbow. "You have it," he whispered. "You have the proof." But their discovery was short-lived. That evening, as Thorne was preparing to present his evidence to the local constable and have Percival arrested, a frantic maid arrived at the inn. "Mr. Thorne, my lady, the tack room, it's been broken into, the saddle, the girth, they're gone." They rushed back to the hall to find the tack room door smashed in. The saddle rack was empty. The crucial piece of evidence, the one thing that could condemn Percival, had vanished. Smeeth stood nearby, a picture of innocent concern. "Terrible, isn't it, sir? Some village ruffians, I'll wager." Percival appeared in the doorway, a smug smile playing on his lips. "Ah, Thorn, still chasing shadows, I see. A shame about the saddle. A family heirloom it was, probably taken for the leather. These are lawless times." It was a devastating blow. Without the girth, their case was circumstantial. A letter that was intercepted, a man with a motive, a journal full of fears. None of it was enough. Alison felt the hope drain out of her. They had been so close. And now, Percival had won. She looked at Thorn and saw in his eyes a reflection of her own despair. They had lost. Later that night, unable to bear the hostile silence of the hall, Alison walked in the garden, the cold air a balm to her fevered thoughts. She heard footsteps on the gravel behind her and turned, expecting Thorn. Instead, a figure emerged from the shadow of a yew hedge, a figure she had last seen lying in a coffin. It was Ashford. He was pale, thinner, and leaned heavily on a walking stick, but he was undeniably, impossibly alive. He held a finger to his lips, his eyes pleading for silence. Before Alison could scream, before she could faint, he pulled her into the deeper shadows of the hedge. "Alison," he breathed, his voice a ghost of its former self. "Forgive me. I had to let you think I was dead. It was the only way." Chapter 4. The Truth in the Dower House. The world spun. Alison clutched at Ashford's coat, feeling the solid reality of him beneath her fingers. He was not a spectre. He was flesh and blood. He was alive. "How?" was all she could whisper. "They showed me. The body. The funeral." "A stranger," Ashford said, his voice haggard with grief and guilt. "A poor soul from the next parish, with no family, who had my height, my colouring. They found him in the ditch, his face ruined by the fall. Percival. He identified him. He was so eager to claim the body, to have me buried and forgotten. I was there, Alison. I saw it all." He led her to a small, derelict hunting lodge on the far edge of the estate, a place no one visited. Inside, a single candle burned. He told her his story. On the day of his death, he had been riding to meet Thorn, following up on the letter he'd sent. He had been ambushed on the road, struck from behind. He had woken in a ditch, disoriented and injured beside a dead man. He had crawled away, hiding in the woods, too weak to move. From his hiding place, he had seen Percival and Smeeth arrive, seen them look at the body, seen Percival nod in satisfaction and ride off. He knew then that his cousin had tried to kill him, and succeeded in killing an innocent. He knew that if he revealed himself, Percival would simply try again. His only chance was to stay dead, to watch, and to wait for the proof that would condemn his would-be murderer. "I saw you, Alison," he whispered, his eyes filled with pain. "I saw you at the funeral, your face so white, so lost. It nearly broke me. But I couldn't reveal myself, not until I had the proof." "We had the proof," Alison said, tears streaming down her face. "The girth. We found the cut. But Percival had it stolen tonight." A flicker of a smile touched Ashford's lips. "Did he?" "Smeeth took it from the tack room, yes. He brought it to Percival, who no doubt burned it in his study fireplace an hour ago." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was covered in drawings and notes. "But Smeeth, you see, is a brute, not a thinker. He took the girth. He did not take the piece of leather I had cut from the other end of it 2 days before the accident, when I first began to suspect Percival's plan. I replaced the girth with an old one I had, but I kept this piece. It is an exact match. The same age, the same wear, the same type of cut." Alison stared at the scrap of leather in his hand, then at his face, and then she was in his arms, sobbing with a relief so profound it was almost painful. He was alive. He was here, and he had won. The next morning, a very different scene unfolded at Klenworth Hall. Percival was at breakfast, complacent in his victory, when the door to the dining room burst open. Ashford Klenworth, leaning on his walking stick but very much alive, walked in, followed by Alison and Mr. Thorne. Percival's face drained of all colour. The half-eaten kippered herring fell from his fork. He looked at Ashford as if he were seeing a ghost, which, in a way, he was. "Good morning, cousin," Ashford said, his voice cold as the grave Percival had tried to put him in. "You look as if you've seen a spirit." Smeeth lunged forward, but Thorne was quicker, stepping between them, a small pistol appearing in his hand. "I wouldn't," he said calmly. While Smeeth was subdued by the local constable whom Thorne had brought, Ashford laid out the case. He produced the scrap of leather, the proof of the sabotage. He produced the journal, with its detailed account of Percival's threats. He produced the testimony of the stable boy about the figure in the tack room. And finally, Thorne produced the signed receipt from the Truro post office, proving Smeeth had stolen Ashford's letter under Percival's orders. Percival, trapped, his face a mask of fury and fear, tried to bluster, to lie. But the evidence was irrefutable. He had conspired to commit murder. When he failed, he had fraudulently identified a body to steal a title and an estate. He was arrested and taken away, his shouts echoing through the halls he had so briefly and brutally claimed as his own. In the weeks that followed, Klenworth Hall began to heal. The dark shadow that had fallen over it was lifted. Ashford, recovering slowly from his injuries, was once again the quiet, gentle man Alison had married. But their bond was no longer one of quiet companionship alone. It had been forged in the fires of loss and fear, and it emerged stronger, deeper, and more precious. They had found each other twice, and they would not let go. One evening, as they sat in the library, the fire crackling merrily, Ashford took her hand. "I owe you my life, Alison. Your courage, your belief in me when all the world said I was gone. It was extraordinary." "I owed you the same," she said softly. "Your letter gave me strength. It gave me a purpose." A knock at the door announced Mr. Thorne, who had stayed in the village to see the legal proceedings through to their conclusion. He was shown in, and Alison greeted him warmly. He was no longer just the investigating magistrate. He was a friend, a man who had stood by her in her darkest hour. "I came to say my farewells," Thorne said, his grey eyes lingering on Alison for a moment. "Percival Klenworth will stand trial for attempted murder and fraud. With the evidence, he will likely be transported for life. You are safe." "We have you to thank, Mr. Thorne," Ashford said, rising to shake his hand. "Your belief in my wife, your persistence when all seemed lost. We are eternally in your debt." Thorne shook his head. "I merely followed the trail your wife blazed, Lord Klenworth. She is the most remarkable woman I have ever met." He turned to Alison and gave a small, formal bow. "My lady, may your life here be filled with the peace and happiness you so richly deserve." Alison felt a small pang at his departure. He had been her rock in the storm. But as she looked at Ashford, at the love and life in his eyes, she knew her place was here, with him. After Thorne had left, they walked to the long gallery. The rain had finally stopped. The moon was rising, full and silver, casting a soft light on the grounds. The skeletal elms no longer looked like claws begging for mercy. They looked like strong, bare arms reaching for the sky. Ashford put his arm around her. "It's over." Alison leaned into him, watching the moonlight spill across the lawns of Klenworth. It was no longer the house of a stranger or the prize of a villain. It was home. And for the first time since she had arrived, she truly felt like its mistress. The widow of Klenworth Hall was a widow no more. The end. My dear and gentle listeners, thus concludes our tale for tonight. If you have walked these winding paths of devotion and doubt with us, if you have felt the hush of candlelit confessions and the tremor of guarded hearts at last laid bare, then you have my most sincere gratitude. It is no small thing to lend one's time and tender attention to a story. In an age as hurried as our own, such constancy is a rare and admirable virtue. I thank you for it most warmly. Should you wish to remain in our company, to wander further through moonlit gardens, stand witness to proud dukes undone, steadfast heroines revealed, and love that triumphs over pride and peril alike, I entreat you to subscribe and join our growing circle. By subscribing, you ensure that no whispered scandal, no long-buried